And we'll start with those. Just a few announcements here. Obviously, we're not meeting in person, so some of these are not very relevant, but we do like to remind people who our post officers are. This is the group that's been leading the posts for 2024. Of course, we're coming up close to 2025 if people want to start thinking about how they may participate with S.A.M.E. in Europe and lend a helping hand to our post. Reach out to any of these people for further information on what their posts entail. For the upcoming programs, we for October will be changing our normal third Thursday out for a Wednesday, the 16th, in order to accommodate our guest speakers who will be Dan Lowry from the Corps of Engineers and Patricia Bolton from U.S. Army Headquarters to talk about the importance of cost, schedule, risk analysis process. And I know that's very relevant for a lot of people now because a number of projects will be kicking off in the new fiscal year. And every project, every design project over a certain value has a CSRA component. And so this is an opportunity to hear from the Europe District and from the Army Headquarters on best practice, lessons learned, and what to look out for while you're completing your CSRAs. We'll also be getting a presentation on resiliency on November 28th. We are targeting December 12th for our Christmas market festivities in Wiesbaden. And then, of course, our big event is targeted for January. I think we're looking at, again, the fourth Thursday in January for our big event, where the Corps of Engineers will be presenting their FY25 program. So keep a lookout for that. We'll try to send out a save the date for that one very early so that you can plan accordingly. Over to young professionals. Nick, are you on the call?
Hey, can I get a mic check?
We can hear you. Thank you, Nick.
Awesome. So I do apologize. It has been quite a few months since I've gotten to updating this slide, and it's just horribly out of date. So I do apologize for that, but we are still trying to find something to do for young professionals before the end of the calendar year. It's just fighting with my current 120-day detail needing all of my time. So please do be on the lookout for it, and we will be coming out with something hopefully that doesn't interfere with the post's plans for November, December.
Thanks very much, Nick. Over to publicity. Do we have Chandler on the line? No Chandler. Okay. Well, here's some information on our website, which we try to keep up to date and post the latest events and what's happening in the Europe region. We also post the recordings of these meetings as well as presentation materials on the YouTube channel. For today's presentation, I will be emailing everybody the presentation that our presenter has put together, just so you have a handout with the information on the latest. And so I will be sending that out to everybody directly, just because we've been having some delays on getting things uploaded to YouTube and out on with our recordings. So I'll be sending that out to everybody individually. And that brings us to our presentation today. We are honored to have Adrian Rule with us, who is the Senior General Construction Engineer and the ABG75 Host Nation Construction Liaison for IMCOM Europe G4 Engineering Branch. Adrian, we're delighted to have you. I'm now going to stop sharing and let you put up your presentation and start your talk. Adrian, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity and the honor to be your today's presenter. And I hope that my presentation can be seen from everybody. Please, a little, oh, thumbs up. Okay, it is seen. So, welcome to my favorite topic in my day-to-day duty, the ABG 1975. And upfront, a little information. I had to condense this presentation out of a 7 days training, 8-hour training. So please be aware this is only a short in brief in what is coming up and what it is all about. So thanks for the introduction. As Tim were telling, I'm the Senior General Construction Engineer here in the G4, working for Chris Collins, our Division Chief, and my branch chief is John Chiaramonte, which is also attending today. And for the sake of the time, I would ask you to hold on your questions till the end, and we will have about 10 minutes so that I can ask further question or I can answer further questions. And if you don't mind, you can send me your questions also via email or can contact me via telephone or whatever, how to reach me in case of questions. Okay, um, I will start. So, ABG 75 or 1975 construction in Germany. What is it? It is an international bilateral administrative agreement between the Federal Ministry of Construction and each sending state force called Auftragsbautengrundsätze 1975, shortly ABG 1975, or for the US colleagues Principles of Construction Contracting ABG 1975. It is a supplement of the NATO SOFA agreement, and it governs how the construction works are accomplished in Germany for and by all armed NATO sending state forces throughout indirect or direct procedures, so not only for the US forces. It is signed by the other sending state forces in 1975, and the US joined that agreement in 1984 after negotiation. The protocol of signature and the implementing instructions, which are giving more detailed procedures to the main framework. Yeah, that's the main thing. The second thing is that the construction contracting principles are bilateral administrative agreements that were concluded as part of a supplementary agreement to the NATO Status of Forces Agreement. These administrative agreement exists. Each partner has his own specifics with the Armed Forces of the United States of America, the Commanders-in-Chief of the British Armed Forces in the Federal Republic of Germany, the Ministry of Defense of Kingdom of the Netherlands, the Ministry of National Defense of the Kingdom of Belgium, the Commander-in-Chief of the French Armed Forces in the Federal Republic of Germany, and the Ministry of Defense of Canada. Any changes in the main framework have to be negotiated and agreed with all these entities and in addition with the NATO partners, which are potentially now having sending state forces in Germany at the moment. The construction principles regulate how and how detailed the host armed forces are to be carried out and the construction projects have to be executed in accordance. Yeah, so we have the possibility to do it by ourselves or throughout the German authorities. Itself, the ABG 1975 is not a contract. It's a bilateral administrative agreement which has processes included, including contractual work. For the US, it is special, and the ABG actions are contractual in nature and require execution by one contracting officers or their authorized representatives. Oh, by the way, a little remark. In the other European nations, there are similar agreements. They are not called ABG 75, but there are uh, um, agreements, administrative agreements in place. If somebody has questions to other states, I can support information on Belgium because I'm also in charge for Belgium and the Netherlands and Luxembourg, um, as they have similar contracts in place also. So, but focusing back on Germany, as said, we have to have a contracting officer, and somebody has a hot mic, I think. Oh, okay.
Yeah, if everybody would mute, please, that would be great. Would be great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay, so in the process of the ABG 1975, we have several steps and processes in place and related forms which have to be filled and signed as required. And as written down here, the ABG documents for the processes 3, 4, 5, 5A, 6, 8, and 9S are considered contractual actions, and the US forces need to have a contracting officer in place who is executing these actions. The protocol of signature is a part of the US forces ABG 1975, and we have paragraphs in there as general announcements and on specifics, but we will focus today on the specialties, and the specifics will be part of the main training and are somehow sometimes a little tricky. Okay, the U.S. forces will enact in contractual matters throughout a U.S. contracting officer or other official designated in writing as the authorized representative of the U.S. forces. Until just a few years ago, the threshold allowing the U.S. military to execute direct construction in Germany was 375,000 euro, which apparently raised in an agreement to 1.2 million in 22 and is now this year, January, settled to 6 million, which is a major improvement. But before we are coming to this topic, I have to get a quick clarification on a common misunderstanding, because that is sometimes harming our execution. So work classification, and it does not matter if it's Air Force, Navy, Army, or Corps of Engineers, are having work classification regulation in place. For the Army, it is the AR 420-1, which is not the same as the work categories in accordance with the ABG 1975 represented in Article 1.3 and 1.4. I will come to that later. And it's definitely not the same as the permit requirements in accordance with state construction law. Why that is mentioned will be driven by the legal framework for overseas execution, which I'm coming to right now. So, legal framework overseas, it's definitely different than CONUS work. So we have here covering international law, which is tied down to the customary international law in between the territorial sovereignty, which covers the sovereign immunity. Um, we mainly work in the US forces under the NATO SOFA agreement, which has supplementary agreements and implementing agreements, example given the ABG 1975, in which boundaries we have to walk when we execute projects in here. We have to respect and recognize the host nation law. We come to that a little later, which includes the EU law, which is covering all kind of overarching laws and regulations. We have to recognize and monitor the zoning and building codes of each federal state on governmental and on state level. We have a obligation to keep environmental laws, energy supply legislation, which is also a hot task right now for getting resiliency established in our installations. We have to respect and apply renewable energy regulations and laws and rules, not only from the US, also from the European and from the host nation areas where we are sitting in, and some kind of tax laws, which I'm totally not talking to because I'm not a tax lawyer. Okay, just a little graphic so that you can see it graphic wise how it ties together. The green circle is the overarching work which we have to do, and the combination in between the US to be followed regulations in combination with the host nation requirements have to be observed and recognized. A little short cutoff again. Article 59 of the supplemental agreement requires that we follow at the minimum the host nation laws. All US forces construction needs to be in accordance with ABG 1975, no matter what. The normal or standard procedure is the indirect execution by German authorities for the US, and that is also sometimes misinterpreted. The direct construction is only an exception to the indirect execution or normal or standard execution, and it is work type and threshold related. We have possibilities as accelerated process requirements, which are a little different to the normal direct construction execution. What is to be observed and has to be implemented are the host nation permit requirements. They cannot surround it or cannot be circumvented. In the article 53, 53A and the supplemental agreement, it is clearly stated that we have to not only recognize, we have to abide by the German law. The Foreign Republic of Germany is not a real contract partner. It's a nominal party, and therefore we are living here in an agreement and not a contract. So please don't treat the host nation representatives, if they are coming from counterpart organizations, as a contractor, as they are not. Critical is the notification process versus the state building law, where we have to require permits. And to be honest, that has all what I'm talking about has nothing to do with the processes which we have to establish when we want to execute throughout the Congress or the Pentagon. So the host nation does not know 1391 processes or 4283 processes. They don't know that. And this training is not covering that binding in at that point. What is recognized on both sections are the environmental laws, emission control, natural preservation, and water safety. Um, we have both on both sides renewable energy laws and cogeneration laws. We have power grid connection regulations on both sides, and we have industrial safety regulations on both sides, which sometimes lead to discussion which kind of law or regulation is more stringent. Because in the NATO SOFA agreements and the implementing instructions there, it is always said the more stringent regulation should apply. To be honest, sometimes it is only a mentality issue or a philosophy issue, like in the ADA compliance requirements. But I have rarely seen a stricter regulation in the US versus the host nation regulations, which we have to observe. So that does not conclude that we can follow US laws and regulation, but it has to be discussed up front with the host nation and we have to have agreement. I will come to that point a little later. I'm focusing right now on the US lines of authorities and responsibilities. I have a little slide deck for the host nation lines of authorities and responsibilities later, but I think, and my assumption is that you all need to know how it works internally so that we get the processes implemented correctly and right, and who has the responsibilities for execution projects in Germany, because that brings us into lots of trouble if the US is not following the right processes. So overarching, EUCOM is the highest authority here in Germany, which is in charge for everything international agreements related, NATO SOFA, and so on and so on, and also AGB75 for the main document negotiation if there are mandatory major changes which are not being able to be influenced by other entities which are authorized to do so. The headquarter USURA F is the delegated ABG 1975 policy oversight to Income E, designated from EUCOM to USURA F, and they delegated the policy oversight to Income E. And they are also the US authority to resolve ABG 75 and host nation construction issues if we could not reach a conclusion on issues on the quadrant down below. Headquarter Income E. In the middle of that picture is the lead for the US forces for ABG 1975 policy. We are the lead for the Army European Director of Public Works for every S.A.M.E and DPW Milcon program. We are the chair of the US ABG Stakeholder Working Group to speak on the behalf of the US forces. And we are the Army Program Coordination via the ABG 1, which is the starting process of the ABG 1975. All other entities here in Europe have to coordinate with us, and we are asking tasks, sending out tasks and asking questions, and then we are starting to negotiate with the ministries of construction and the Ministry of Defense on state and on federal level to get our program executed as required. Who is finally responsible for executing, which is a major execution for any kind of project in a installation? So the garrison commander or the base commander for the Air Force or a Navy base officer who is in charge is the responsible owner of all property on an installation, no matter who is the tenant or the higher headquarter in that installation. the garrison commander is the real property owner of the facilities and the installation property. And this person, sorry for the him, may be held personally liable for any public laws that are broken. Every black construction, every other issue, he will be responsible for that. And he is considered being the Bauherr in accordance with host nation definition. So if the garrison commander or his team or his designated person is not knowing a project on an installation, then the host nation does not know the project. And therefore, there is a little issue in the weeds. So coordination with the garrison command is most important. The senior commander may be held personally liable for any public law that is broken, as the senior commander is the individual responsible for determining priorities at the garrison in accordance to Army Regulation 620. So if the garrison commander gets some wrong guidance, then the person who were ordering that could be also held liable. And General Williams is not very happy when he is blamed to have ordered black construction. Executing boots on the ground are the directors of the public works, or the DPWs, or the BCEs on the Air Force side. They are responsible for classifying any work or service related to the garrison owned, leased, or controlled real property. The DPW also may be held personally liable for any public law that are broken. Army regulations, especially Army Regulation 420-1 and federal state construction codes, shall apply as needed. And that's important. And I know that we have a full team who can assist the garrison commander, the DPW, or the senior commander, which is the acquisition team. So every mission requirement, you have to follow that acquisition team strategy, how to plan, develop, and execute. And all stakeholders should be involved as needed. Responsibilities of the stakeholders. So construction companies, and all the slides are in the handout, so you can take your time to read it afterwards, and I hope you will filter some questions afterwards. So mainly the construction companies have their piece, and the Bauherr, garrison commander, or the designers or the site supervisors have specific tasks which are in the need to follow the AGB75 processes and the required steps in that processes. Responsibilities translate to is a little picture where you can read how the persons are interacting in accordance to their requirements in the project, and to ensure that the persons are involved as needed and the quality assurance is done correctly as also needed. And sorry for rushing through it. We are nearly half through, and I have nearly crossed 15 minutes, so 20 minutes. So I have to rush a little bit more. Sorry for that, but I want.
You're doing great, Adrian. On time, you're doing great. Yeah. Fine.
Awesome. Thank you. So there are three methods of execution in the AGB75. There is, as said, the standard, the indirect procedure, which is covered in the Article 1.5 of the AGB75. And it's everything above 6 million now at the moment as standard in Germany. So every project in an amount over 6 million is definitely going as indirect. Different kind of assumptions will be covered a little later, because to every standard there is an exception, but I will tell you that afterwards. So, means planning, execution, and administration of construction works by the German authorities on behalf of the US forces using their own personnel or contract between them and civilian construction engineering and architectural firms and specialists. Easy going. We have to talk to them and ask for indirect procedure, and they will execute if they could. And we have the direct procedure, which is the Article 1.6 of the ABG 75. Everything below 6 million, if no compelling reasons raise which disputes direct execution. Since January, we have that new threshold established, and the Ministry of Construction gave us a really broad approval of everything below 6 million executed if the announcement process and the coordination process has been kept, and if the installation or community authorities or the federal state authorities did not raise any kind of compelling reason in writing, then we will able to execute under direct execution throughout the Corps or our own personnel, whomever is going to execute it for us. That means the planning and execution and administration of construction works by the US forces using our own personnel or labor employed by us or through contracts which are led directly by the US forces. That is important, this sentence. Then we have, since 2 years, the accelerated procedure is called BDV, Beschleunigtes Durchführungsverfahren in Germany, and it's a supplement to the ABG 75. It has no euro limits, but a permission is required by host nation to go that route. So once again, more important is the coordination piece, the starting piece, which I'm coming a little in a couple of seconds to it. And we have to really good work on the coordination so that the host nation understands our program or our project so that they can make the right decision to give us the right permissions. Means accelerated procedure. Means the planning, execution, and administration of construction works by the US forces using our own personnel or labor employed by us or contracts which are led directly by the US forces under supervision of the German authorities. The reason behind that is that in the accelerated procedure, the permit required processes are included. And as we struggle to have the right persons on hand, which are authorized to ask for permits, the host nation is acting on our behalf. So it's a combination on an indirect and direct procedure per se. Yeah, so it's a little bit giving us more flexibility to execute larger projects if needed. Here is the explanation what the difference is at the direct procedure, what consultation means. So we have the permit to execute below 6 million to construct and organize, but we have to announce everything to the host nation. There are thresholds included, so the consultation where we just need to let know the German Republic what we do want to execute is 150K. So everything below 150K is normally not being discussed, but when you are crossing 150K and going higher, then you have to announce it throughout the ABG1. Sometimes there are permit requirement projects below 150K, and do you have to announce them at the first time? But I will come to that point a little later in the final steps for the ABG1. an agreement with the Germans have to be established for minor construction works at, over 150K up to 6 million, and everything above 6 million. And we got granted permission in between the framework of 150K to 6 million if there is no major concern raised. So let's start and have that conversation early on to be able to execute as needed. And then there are exceptionally construction works in other cases which the host nation can give us approval to go for direct execution. And for example, I have a full fire department, which is a special building, which got approval for going direct execution by the US forces for about 7.8 million. Because the local authorities were not able to execute in the time frame when we need to have it established. This is also part of the negotiation, and it is a major duty of the garrison commander or the DPW to coordinate with the local authorities to execute what they need to execute. So coordination and consultation and communication is key to success at that point. I really want to have a little short focus on the Article 49.3 direct procedure because that is coming into play. US shall respect German building and environmental regulations and shall ensure, in cooperation with the German authorities, that the necessary permissions are obtained. Authorities of the forces and Federal Republic of Germany shall agree concerning the form and extent of consultation in paragraph 3. We always communicate. And the accelerated procedure, similar to Article 49.3, host nation is supervision on the project and assisting with permit requirements. Remark, shall respect is international law language. It translates to must be followed. And I cannot emphasize that too much or too heavily and focus on that. This is causing issues. If you are not following that, you are causing really trouble, and it is pain to heal flag construction. And I am honored at that point to introduce you the ABG 1975 handbook, which includes protocol of signature, cover letter, and implementing instructions, written by John Chiaramonte and updated as needed in the last 3 years by myself. So it is covering all the entities in here. And if you require the handbook, I am more than happy to send it out to you if requested. It contains, in the first part, the definitions, authorities, program coordination. In part 2, execution, a detailed description to indirect processes. In part 3, execution of the direct procedures, and the concluding provisions in part 4. More interesting is how the process is built up. The ABG1, the program coordination led by us here in Income E, is the start of the process. We have two times where we are coordinating with the host nation. So we are sending taskers out to the garrisons or to the Air Force and ask them for providing the actual construction project in February of each year. Then we have a review cycle again of that ABG1 in August, where we double check if our data are still accurate. Most important is throughout the time frame, there are mission related projects coming up which are not announced. They have to be included into the ABG 75 either in the next February transmission or in the next August transmission. And if these unknowns are coming up, you better should call Incom G4 directly and ask for outside coordination with the host nation, which is apparently working pretty well, especially when we have mission-related fast action like the stationing act of the NATO here in Wiesbaden. We were able to secure legal execution of the projects up front. We were executing flag construction. So for as early as you can announce something, please make sure that it is established in the coordination process. Now there is the ABG2 letter of intent for direct procedure, which is following after the coordination process, and if the German side agreed on a direct execution, depending on the project, and the direct indirect procedure forms in the steps as required. So we have the ABG3 for request approval award document for the indirect procedure. It's a back and forth in between the German and the US side, but it is initiated by the US. And we have tender acceptance forms, change order documents, user change requests, order documents, a really well-defined process, step-by-step process, which is established in the AG75. So, submission of the construction program, Article 3 of the ABG75. So as said before, we are coordinating and communicating with the host nation on all projects above 150K for a minimum, and for below 150K, everything which is related to permissions. On that list are always all indirect projects, regardless of the cost. So everything which we want to have executed by the host nation needs to be on that list. The direct projects needs to be on the list as listed. So all construction projects, high value maintenance and repair projects, especially those that may impact ongoing or future indirect projects, and other projects, including troop construction where permissions or notifications under German public law may be necessary. Example given: demolition, new pavement, pole separators, upgrade of hazardous waste collection point, and if you are changing your setup in a building which affects the building fire code. That's it. We will set up that list, and then it is going to be in accordance to the NATO SOFA agreement that the Bauamt must make notification and obtain permissions where required and submit necessary applications and undertake relevant legal procedures. It is called Verfahrensstandschaft, administrative and legal representation for the US forces in Germany. US is required to provide supporting project documentation in German language. US is required to execute projects with German trained, licensed and recognized subject matter experts or AEs, own staff or contractors being authorized as Baueingabeberechtigt, authorized to submit building application permits and follow the established process as required if we are going indirect. Direct. If in doubt about need for obtaining construction permits or other required permissions to include related operational permits and or making any notifications, contact the Bauamt on local level. Warning: Bauamt may stop a direct construction project if the necessary permissions are not properly obtained. Now, the recent new update, which is really important because it gives us the opportunity to establish ESPCs, ERCEP, or other energy resiliency or mission relevant energy projects. We recently updated the ABG1 cover sheet for coordination and established a new work category for the ABG75, and it is E. E for eco or energy projects, which is related to resiliency, efficiency, or mission capability. It could be combined with the former category of works, and they are considered, no matter of the amount, for direct construction. The German side sees potential contractors for ESBCs, ESCOs, as contractually bound to the US government or the US Armed Forces. That said, that does not release the real property owner per se, the garrison commander, to not coordinate. So the ESCOs need to establish building specifics, horizontal or vertical construction, into the ABG1 coordination with the real property owner of the installation. That is most important so that the host nation understands what we are going to execute. At that point, they are giving approval and they have the right to observe and inspect these measurements because it is infrastructure related. And infrastructure is always critical because we are not owning our land, we are living on consigned space, and even the buildings are not our own property itself. We are living on consigned space. So every improvement or investment which we do on German installation needs to be in accordance to the host nation requirements. So therefore, the coordination process is to be met. Little kind of short phrases you will face in the handbook or maybe in the handout which you will be getting from Tim are these acronyms. Just shortly to again dance together. And for that part, it would be closing the end of the brief, and I have 32 minutes, and I feel pretty damn good. So we can switch over to ask questions.
Adrian, you should feel pretty damn good. That was an amazing presentation. Thank you very much. Very informative. I would take questions. Yep. Big applause for Adrian. But before maybe I open it up to the audience, I did want to point out that we have 68 participants on the call, which is a really good crowd to have for these events. So Adrian, it just shows how important people find this topic and how critical you are to the sharing of that information. So thank you very much. I did have a couple questions. I did have a couple questions maybe to get it kicked off. One, is there a difference between the accelerated procedure versus getting permission to execute directly? Is there a difference between, or are those the same?
So literally they are the same because they are following similar processes. And it is, for the German side, it is considered direct execution, no matter if it is accelerated procedure or if it's direct execution. The main difference is that in the direct execution, which is established since a couple of years, that the host nation is pushing all the duties and the obligations to us. So everything, every document needs to be in German. We are fully solely by our own and ourselves and have to execute in accordance to German laws and regulations, which we hardly can read sometimes. In the accelerated procedure, we have to pay a little fee, which is a lot less than in the direct execution. It's only 2% versus 5.6 or 7.5% for direct execution. But that has the smart piece that the host nation is helping us with understanding and getting the permits and understand what needs to be executed in accordance to law. So they are supervising us per se, that's their call, but they are giving us the helping hand to assist. So they are more helping than versus supervising in
Right.
the accelerated procedure.
Oh, okay. Understood. And then another question, slightly different. Based on our experience in designing projects in various federal states, it seems like there's a difference between some federal states. For example, Bavaria projects typically go indirect, whereas Rhineland-Pfalz has more of a tendency to allow and permit direct execution. Any thoughts on that?
Yes, sir. And I can give you a clear understanding on that piece. And I'm just going forward in my little kind of backup slides. So we
Okay.
have 5 different federal states here in Germany, which we are living in. And every kind of these federal states are independent entities. So they have their own laws and regulations, their own administrative ministries, and they have their own Landesbauordnung, which is the state construction ordinance. They are slightly different. Sometimes it is the same language, just in a different article, but they have their own processes and procedures. So in North Rhine-Westphalia, I cannot, for example, execute direct execution per se because the regulations on site are not giving us allowance. They require to follow the indirect process. In Bavaria, I can execute several things which I could never execute in Hessen, and vice versa. It really depends on the local area, and that's the reason why it's most important that the garrison commander is going to coordinate locally at that areas. And that's really structured for the army per se. Kaiserslautern is in charge for USAC Rheinland-Pfalz, Wiesbaden for USAC Wiesbaden, and they have their local ties and their counterparts, and they know exactly what needs to be done, especially when it comes to tenant projects, which are sometimes not coordinated with the DPW because nobody is communicating in the garrison. Then it is sometimes really leading to issues. But really, everything is comparable. It's not absolutely the same, but it could vary in the host nation where you are located at. And if you have special communities, like for example here in the Rheinland-Pfalz area, Kaiserslautern is completely different than Ida Oberstein. Ida Oberstein has their local Bauamt, their own air pollution, what kind of whatever, and they have different rules and regulations locally also. And Gammersheim could be a tricky area also, and so it varies where you are at. So please coordinate with your garrison commander and their team because they can help out and they can give helping hand on that issues.
Very good. Thank you, Adrian. On behalf of the whole group and community online, it looks like, Adrian, there's a lot of interest in your handbook. And it also appears maybe that your link is only valid for US government employees. Is there a possibility to get one that either a link that works for everybody or maybe a copy of the handbook that we could share with the group?
Tim, I would send you the handbook immediately after the
Okay.
meeting. If you can spread it out, it would be awesome. And I
Okay.
can also give you a trifold. A
Okay.
trifold is a condensed two-pager where you
Amazing.
can just print out on a DIN 3 paper sheet, German DIN 3, which you can read because it's really small. But it has condensed all information out of the handbook really smart. And you please do me a favor, give me a feedback on the material which I'm sending out. That would be awesome. Also from the audience, please give me feedback.
Okay, that's amazing. Thank you. And maybe even you could print the trifold on an A0 and put it as a poster in your office for your staff.
Yeah,
So that would be great.
That would be awesome. Yeah, right.
The before I do have a couple points I would like to underscore that Adrian made. Before I do that, I would open it up to the audience in case anybody has questions. I'll just pause here for a moment if anybody wants to raise their hand and ask a question. No, you must have done an amazing job, Adrian. No questions from the. Oh no, we do have one. Sorry.
Okay.
We have a written one here. Which authority is tracking the compliance with the GEG 2024 for direct execution of new or repair projects through the COE, Corps of Engineers, I guess?
Awesome question. So, on the one hand, it is the local Bauamt throughout this design process, throughout the execution phase, and at the handover there is coming an entity into play which is called our landlord, the BIMA. And for technical authority, the BAJUT, which is the Bundeswehr, the Joint Armed Forces entity for security and safety measures in Germany. They will also inspect, and they are part of the BAJUT, which is a entity out of the Ministry of Construction. So at latest at the handover process, we will have a final information, but I encourage everybody throughout the design process to get a hand on them for asking for either sitting in the charrette, having time to review, and throughout the permit process, be open-minded as appropriate. There are some kind of projects which are security related, which we are not sharing, but whatever could be openly discussed with the host nation authorities and especially with your garrison team, do that. They will involve everybody who is needed. Very good question.
Very good question. Yeah, that was from Rhein, which I thought was a Platz in Frankfurt, but apparently it's a person as well. So excellent. A couple of points I did want to underscore, and that would be, as a service provider to the U.S. government, when we have projects, you normally have a broad spectrum of stakeholders involved in your projects, and different to the private sector where it's very clear who the Bauherr is on projects. Sometimes when we're involved in project, it wasn't that clear. So thank you, Adrian, for providing that clarity that the garrison commander is the Bauherr of the projects. I think that's really helpful.
Yeah. There is potentially a little alibi, but it still has to be coordinated throughout the garrison commander. Sometimes on Milcon projects, the USAs or the Corps of Engineers is the Bauherr because they are entitled throughout policy. But still, if their projects, they are need to coordinate it through the garrison command, and then in that specific cases they are called out as Bauherr because they are the Bauherr. But still, as soon as it becomes property of the real property owner, which is at that case the garrison commander or base commander, then it is his responsibility. It should be a no-brainer to talk to the garrison commander no matter what.
Yeah, and no, thank you for even that more clarity on that, because that was also my understanding that the Corps of Engineers also was the Bauherr for many of our projects.
Right.
Adrian, you also touched on standards, which is more stringent, host nation or UFC or US. And with every design project, all of the designers on this call, and probably construction companies as well, face that issue. And I think we would like maybe just to do an event just on that topic. And the fact that you called it a philosophical decision-making process, I think is right on. There are so many considerations to make when applying different standards, like who's using it, how many people are in it. all those types of questions. And then I did participate in a discussion on that topic once, and it was really interesting how the conversation very quickly boiled down to coming up with the most stringent standard is very much depending on how much respect you have for your fellow colleagues. And and again, it just goes back to the philosophy of choosing standard, which is just a fascinating topic. And
Yeah,
then yeah, go ahead.
maybe I can give you a little hint. If you are starting the process throughout process coordination and you first establish either the request of an ABG2 direct or an indirect execution, and you request in that document that following policies, US policies, should be recognized, then it lowers the defense and fighting for each and other projects. So as said, it's a communication issue. It's not really a thing when you bring up US rules and regulations after the fact, after the first designs have been established, then it becomes to a change, which becomes to a lost design, which is including fees. So prevent that, make your case up front, discuss as required, and the process of communication is key to success on this piece.
Yeah. Agree and then decide, as opposed to decide and then later disagree. So
right.
Very good. And then just the final point I would make, and we are kind of coming up on time here, is that it sounded like you said, Adrian, I'm going to paraphrase a little bit, but no matter what execution approach we're using, be it direct, indirect, accelerated approach, that does not mean it does not mean that you can ignore host nation permitting requirements and standards.
Right. So the permit requirements are a non-discussion topic.
Yeah. Right.
So even if you are going direct and you are thinking, oh God, I'm allowed to use FAR regulated contracts and I can execute as required. Yes, you better put in your FAR contract the requirement that you have to follow host nation laws.
Right.
And that is really the case. And I was questioned the last couple of trainings I had why. The reason is because we are on consigned space.
Right.
We are not really owning that. We are investing in our some kind of long leased, own used building, and in case that we are giving back the installation has to be in accordance to code of the host nation, and therefore we can get our investments partially back. If we are not following it, and if we are doing black construction, we have to dismantle on our own costs. So we are paying twice for upgrading or building it and then dismantling it afterwards, which does not make sense. And therefore, the investment is a really interest of the US government. If we are investing our good money, then if we turn it back and do not need it anymore, then we should get our investments partially back at least.
Amazing.
So that's the reason behind that.
Makes sense. We have a comment from Timo here. When it comes down to the most stringent of whatever, you won't get by having a code alignment document that identifies, addresses at least the most important US and host nation standards, and therefore the resulting requirements. Yep, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah,
that sounds good. In any case, we're so fortunate to have you, Adrian, and the U.S. government is fortunate to have you, such subject matter expert. And today's discussion was really valuable. You see it by the number of participants we have, and then just boiling it down to that. I mean, just to cap off on that final thought that host nation permitting requirements are so important. Really is what makes our region unique. Being here in Europe is that we have a panoply of multiple different standards and requirements that we face, and therefore having teams that are knowledgeable in those geographies obviously is very important to the success of our
Right.
projects, which are supporting the U.S. government mission. And that's what our whole aim is as an organization, to do that. And we'll just leave it there. So thank you very much, Adrian. I
What-
owe you
what-
a SAME coin that you
Thank
will
you.
get, and I'll let you have the last word. Adrian.
Yeah. So one last alibi from me. Whenever there is coming up an issue I have a problem locally that either a permit is not given because of, or we have a really deep fight with code applicabilities. My call to all my garrisons or all U.S. forces is give me a call. I'm the host nation liaison in that case. I'm leading the negotiations up to the ministries, and I will find a solution for your specific problem.
Amazing. That's great support. Thank you, Adrian. Glad to know
Thank you.
we have that. Yeah. And so we'll leave it there, everybody. Again, this presentation will be made available through our website, and it also attached to this meeting in case you're able to download it from there. And then we'll send out the handbook and the handout that Adrian provided. Thank you, everybody, and have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Adrian. Bye-bye.